Thanks, guys, for joining. It's great to finally see you here in person. We had a great chat in preparation to this, so hopefully we'll have a good chat here as well and give all the insights we gave before. But to jump straight in, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself, so maybe we can just go one by one.
Okay, hi everybody, I'm Jan, Iris Capital, investing in France and Germany, early stages and across Europe. In the late stages, I built an innovators room, a Slack community for founders and innovators. First time in Riga actually, so thanks for inviting me. And yeah, happy to be here.
And you're just like such a Gen Z, right?
So Gen Z.
It's like so Gen Z.
So Gen Z, oh my god, yeah.
Hey, thanks for inviting us, and great to be here with you guys. I'm Madeline. I'm head of German, Austrian, Swiss sourcing, and at Peak, we're an Amsterdam fund, so it's fun to be in the Baltics here. We're going to be moving here soon as well. I'm half American, half Italian. I grew up in Spain. I'm 24, and before I joined Peak, I also built my own small fund with a thesis to invest in young founders and young entrepreneurs. Yeah, excited for what questions you have for us.
Cool. I'm Daria from Trind Ventures, Estonian fund. Originally Ukrainian, moved to Baltic 3 years ago, moved across Europe, started off setting up an accelerator for teenagers, and that's how I got into entrepreneurship, and then moved on to Trind Ventures, and now investing in passionate founders and representing Gen Z, 20 years old, but yeah, in investing world.
Hello everyone, I'm Federico from Karma Ventures, and I'm definitely the oldest one on the stage right now.
Are you even Gen Z?
Sorry?
Are you even Gen Z?
Apparently, we can discuss that later. But yeah, so I'm associated at Karma Ventures, B2B SaaS deep tech fund based in Tallinn, in Estonia. I moved to Tallinn a year ago. Before that, a couple of years in product management for insurance telematics. We're a bit more technical side there. But yeah, that's kind of me. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining. And for those who joined just recently, I've been here all day. But I'm the COO at TechChill and also a fellow Gen Zer. I oftentimes say that I'm not and say that I'm a millennial, but for this talk, I will be proudly a Gen Zer. All right, but to jump straight in, you already mentioned some of your backgrounds and why you got into VCs. So maybe we can move along and I can just ask, what's your take on, we know there's this picture or this persona that we usually imagine investors being, and I think it has changed throughout the years, and we see that diversity is getting better and a lot of other rates are getting better. So maybe what's your take on how the game is changing? Is it changing? Is it changing for good? So anyone who would like to comment?
I can start if you guys want. So we had a Zoom call as a context a couple of days ago to prepare for this, okay? And one of the things that I was researching around was this article from Guy Kawasaki from 2006, 2007. And he was saying that VC was in a bubble because younger people were getting into venture capital. So it hasn't aged very well, I have to say, like, you know, after those years. But right now we're seeing that a lot more people get into VC. So this is a fact. This is something that is happening. There's a lot more diversity at lower stages in kind of like, you know, lower seniority in VC. And I think that there has been many consequences. Technology is moving faster. VCs have to adapt faster. There's new VC models happening. So we need also the input of like younger people. And right now, Gen Z, like somebody born in the year 2000 is 22. Like, you know, we have to kind of be aware of that. And yeah, so Gen Zs are proving to be perhaps the right ones for some things. It's not the holy grail, but yeah.
Maybe too. I'm gonna steal the spotlight from you. No, go ahead.
No, so I'm going to say, I think what's changing, if you look at you know, the current generation of junior VCs, right? I think all of us have only worked, quote unquote, in VC so far, right? So like, if you look at millennial VCs, most of them had other careers before actually becoming investors. You know, they worked in banking and consulting, built a startup. Actually, now this generation of VCs across Europe, in the US, and Asia, they're actually full-time VCs and have not done anything else. They joined right out of uni, and I think that's quite interesting. That you have, like, you know, people who haven't seen the real world, right, outside of venture, and I think there's several reasons for that. We might dive in deeper, but yeah, I'm not going to steal more time, Maddie.
Yeah, there was a question how it is changing the game, and basically we need to think that the life cycle of the fund is usually 10 years, and VC was usually the industry that didn't have this generational transition. So you have like many people working there, like several partners working there for 10 years, and then you don't see the generational transition that happens in every industry. So this started happening on a very large scale in venture capital for the last like 5 years, and that's why it's very, very refreshing in terms of what kind of perspectives we are getting into investment process. We see age diversity, for example, in our fund, which also helps in the evaluation of the deals and everything. And also we are more diverse, I would say, in terms of who are getting into the investment teams. So it's from the perspective of the founders, I would say it's really helpful, like we are the gatekeepers, and really helpful to get new founders that haven't been, I would say, the gems that haven't been discovered, and they can get to the VCs that previously they didn't have the access to them. So yeah, that's my take on how the game is more or less changing.
Madeline, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's, whoa. It's very loud. I think it's really interesting what you say in terms of that generational change, because I think what we also see is the differences between generations for the younger generations, right? They're happening faster, and they're also more, right? Like the difference between myself and my young cousins, right? Like I still remember an age before internet, not internet, but like, you know, I had one old computer in my house that I think I was able to use when I was like 6 years old, right? And now I look at sort of the children of my cousins, and I mean, after COVID, they're 5, 6 years old, they're learning on iPads, right? So I don't know what that's going to do to them, but our perspective of the world, our childhood, is radically different than, let's say, you know, I'm looking at my old boss right here, right? I mean, we still went to kindergarten and didn't have screens in the classroom, right? We share that similarity. But if you take someone even 5, 6, 10 years younger than me, I don't know why the 5, 6 wasn't a big jump, but it's going to be a radically different experience. And so I think with that generational change, we also see it's not just the inflection of it is more. I don't know how to end that point.
Yeah, do you think that also because us and the next generations have been digitally native, or we have we have been raised with technology, and also younger people, do you think it's easier for them to get into tech and also investments and starting businesses because they just see that you don't have to use this one product, one solution, you can actually make something, you can combine things. So it's kind of like the shift is because of the digital era.
I think it's a combination of, yes, you know, we grew up with sort of a tech-first experience, so I think we're just more comfortable with it. But I also think, you know, look at the socio-political conditions of people our age, right? Like, I'm half American, right? So when I was very young, 9/11 happened, which everybody fucking talks about all the time, right? Because it was a huge shift in my own country's policy for everything, right? When we were 8 years old, or 10 years old, I'm really bad at math, 2008 happened, the crash happened, right? Which was a radical, you know, resetting of everything that we expected from, you know, or what we saw from our parents, you know, potentially losing their jobs, right? And then in our last years of university, COVID happened, right? So these are like major global events that have sort of thrown out the playbooks and expectations. And I think that combined with the fact that we're more comfortable with technology means that we're more likely to say, well, why, right?
Yeah, maybe something more like, especially about COVID. So we've seen how the whole world has been shifting towards digital. So right now, you know, information is accessible through the internet, but people spend a lot of time on the internet. So people actually build companies on the internet, teams working remote. So for a young person to become either an entrepreneur or to become a VC as well, it's becoming much more accessible. So you can get in touch with partners from VCs, you can get in touch with with associates anywhere in the world, and you can just, you know, you don't even have to take a plane anymore. So this is getting, you know, it's changing the game and making it more accessible, allows younger people to easily get into the...
I think what's super interesting, what Maddie just said, despite all this uncertainty, I think, in our current times, right, Gen Zs are super entrepreneurial, right? So I think, I mean, the cost of founding a company has decreased as well, so this is, you know, helping. But you see that despite this uncertainty, people are entrepreneurial, they're trying new things, they're founding companies, and I think this is why being a Gen Z investor also so much fun, because we actually see founders who are younger than us even, right, building amazing companies, raising millions, billions of dollars in funding, so yeah.
And there is one controversial point, is that many, for example, US funds controversial points. US funds that started hiring lots of young people, especially consumer-oriented funds, because they don't really want to miss out on trends. And we young people, we understand the values, we understand the foundations that are behind the brands that are targeting us. So that's why, like, one controversial thing is that funds are hiring young people to not to miss out. So yeah, that's normal, but yeah.
And I think that the sort of sensitivity to what actually is cool and what actually is a trend, I think it's even, I see it in people younger than me, it's more of there's a higher threshold, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever been on TikTok and you see someone making a TikTok that, like, you know, just like shouldn't be on TikTok, right? And it's just cringe, right? There's just this feeling of like, ugh. Or you see brands on Twitter trying to be like sassy, and then you just kind of look at it and you're like, oh, that's so bad, right? So I think also like the sensitivity to what is cool and appealing to a younger audience, it really has to come from that audience itself, or it will be ridiculed, like you'll be killed in the comments and in sort of I think the social just dialogue around, you know, the company, where it's really off.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that also, if we bring in younger investors or younger people in the industry, it's also easier to connect with these young founders, because we do have a lot of Gen Z founders. We hear a lot of stories about people finding super successful companies, some of the most successful companies in the world, or apps or social media companies, within their university years, within their high school years. But when it comes to investors, it's like, no, it's not really. You need experience. We have this type of all the things you need. So the question is, from my side, have you ever come across the situation or the bias that you're not good enough because you don't have that 10+ years of experience or 5+ years of experience or whatever else? Has that ever been within your journey?
Well, honestly, I mean, most IC meetings are like that, right? So you talk to your partners and you discuss a deal, and they're like, well, I've seen this many, many times. It doesn't work because this and that, right? And I think, as I said before, we kind of are the young bloods in VC. We come without much experience. So I guess, we are definitely daring a bit more. Like, we actually, I think, are also, I mean, Gen Zs are activists oftentimes. I mean, I'm thinking Fridays for Future. And I think that's also why IC meetings and venture funds can be so controversial sometimes, because there's actually sometimes this generational debate. But as we said before, I think most funds now are appreciating that. They hired us because we bring in this new perspective on things. But of course, I think there's always this clash between experience and then, us just daring things that they might have seen before.
There's a really interesting statistic actually that supports this, or I think that kind of adds to I think what you're kind of getting at. And I've definitely been in calls, right, when we're talking about, like, I don't know, something like process mining, and I'm like, bro, I don't really, I'm not going to know this better than you, right? And you're speaking to a founder who's been like, I've been doing this for 40 years, and I'm like, ooh, nice to meet you. And I'm not going to know his or her or their business better, right? But what you do see when it comes to, I think it was some study on the success and the age of the founders of the most successful B2B SaaS companies, right? And those most successful B2B SaaS companies, there's this interesting curve wherein it's either founded by very, very young founders, like fresh out of university, or ones that are kind of 45 plus. And I think the analysis that people have extrapolated from that is either you've got silver hair in the industry, you deeply understand the problems, how to navigate those, and you're able to build real value, or sort of ignorance is bliss, and you're able to say, you don't have the bias of it's been tried before, it's been done before, and so you just kind of go out and then, you're the one founder that somehow actually makes it work for once. And so it's a very interesting actual proof in the fact that either it's, ignorance is bliss, or you got to know what you're talking about.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to add a point to Jan. He mentioned about the experience, how much experience we have. And in VC, we have such thing as apprenticeship model, I would say. Like when you're coming very early and you're learning from not founders, but partners who have tons of experience, and they are sharing it with you. And in VC, when you're staying, the longer you're staying, you're accumulating the experience. So basically, one point is that we are people who are learning these things on the ground. We are not accepting just the conventional knowledge that exists like at schools, universities, but we are going deep into the topic and we are building up the knowledge given the real cases that exist in our portfolio companies. So that's how we're building up our knowledge. And yeah, we don't have experience, but you have partners to whom we are bringing new perspectives, and they appreciate the fact, like in our fund, our partners appreciate the ideas that I put in, and I accept the fact that I don't know everything, and I'm happy to learn from them. So it's like exchange.
Yeah. And if you also look at how education is changing, I think it supports that as well. I mean, I remember back in school, right? We used to have exams where you couldn't look at your books, right? So it was all about what did you remember from the course. And when I was graduating university, everything was an open book exam. Knowledge was fully accessible to you. And during COVID, because it was hard to stop cheating and plagiarism, they decided, fine, you can have every resource available to you. A lot of universities did, right? And thus, it was not a matter of what do you know, what do you remember, but rather, if you have the full spectrum of knowledge in front of you and the tools to access that, then rather, how do you best use that? How do you best navigate that, right? What can you synthesize from that? And I think that goes to show how we also will approach speaking to founders or investigating markets or being founders ourselves, right? It's not just based on what we can remember, but rather based on the full spectrum of what's available to us and how do we use it.
Yeah, what I love about VC is that is this the industry where you teach yourself and you create the path yourself, and you take together the pieces of knowledge that you need for becoming a good investor yourself. You're not following some certain path that has been established for you, but you're taking the pieces that would make you a valuable investor, and you're choosing the vertical, you're choosing the expertise, and you're building it up with time. Yeah.
What's your vertical of choice?
I love creator economy, so everything related to that. Also NFT related, but it's in a way related to fashion tech and luxury fashion. So.
Okay, Miss Luxury.
So Gen Z.
So Gen Z.
So Gen Z.
One thing that you also mentioned upon in your comments was that Gen Zs are kind of activists. So do you see that? You mentioned Web3 and creator economy and a lot of these trendy industries even. But do you think that you navigate towards the more of the impact industries? I think that from my perspective, I think from people around me of the same age, we don't really care about money as the core thing if it's not with impact, because we're going to be the ones living, for a very long time. We're going to be the ones that will be living in this economy, living within the political decisions made now. So it matters to us what is actually going on around us. So do you think that you gravitate more towards the impact or more towards impactful industries?
Yeah, maybe I can take this one. For sure, Gen Zs is kind of like representative of younger generations. There's going to be a new generation after the Gen Z. We'll see how it's going to be called and how it's going to be working. But they have younger generations have a higher stake in this overall kind of climate change and kind of protecting the environment and so on. As you mentioned, they're the ones that are going to hopefully live the longest on the planet, so they're going to see most of the effects afterwards. It's very important, I think, for younger generations to really get rid of this greenwashing kind of concept of, hey, I'm doing something that is pro the environment, and it doesn't really have that much of an impact, but at least it's a marketing play. At least I can say that I'm doing this, or I can, I feel happy when I file my ESG report. Yeah. So younger generations want something to change because we know that it's not sustainable. And probably, 50 years from now, if we don't do something, it's going to be much more critical. Yeah. And we're going to be the one to kind of fix all those problems that we're piling up right now. So there's definitely a lot more at stake for the younger generation. And there's a lot more willingness to, spend and work and really do the effort to change it. Yeah.
I think we also need to really change how we speak about impact. And I think that it's something that I still fight against with some other people older than me in the industry, which is, I think the narrative has been, impact doesn't make money, right? That's why we've carved out different impact funds, right? That may have different return expectations and a different LP profile, because it doesn't have the same sort of, it doesn't make that much profit, right? And I think that's something that will change, because we don't need to get into how I think the market is broken and what deserves to be getting money doesn't get money, but ultimately the biggest problems facing us are climate, for example, and the reality of capitalism is, if problem solution fits, then money is going to be made there, and the next billions and billions of euros in innovation and in returns from a venture perspective will probably be in climate. And so I think we need to also shift, we can't be segregating investments versus impact investments. I do believe that those all have to be mixed, and also we need to change the hat of, impact investments also make money.
is something that we can define ourselves. What is an impact? Is it helping one person? Is it helping 100 people? Is it about health or climate or whatever else? Even, you know, well-being. So it can really be many different things. Yeah, Daria, did you?
I guess I can add about this. So it's more about like the nature of who we are and what we value as people and our generation. So that's why we are naturally deviating more towards founders or the investments that are able to create the impact. So it's more about us and like our decision-making process, I would say. So I'm personally always leaning towards the things that can change the way people interact or the way technologies interact. So yeah.
Have you ever been an activist in your own fund? I've definitely looked at an investment, or we were discussing it, and I was like, guys, we can't invest in this, you know? Like this is perpetuating problems. Have you ever had to like speak up and like kind of ring the bell?
I mean, I think kind of you have to have an answer to this question, right? So I think any company we now talk to, either as investors even, right? Do you have an ESG clause, right, for example? But also if I speak to a company, I also need to know how they're thinking about these things. Why? Because in the end, it's also about retaining talent, acquiring talent. And we Gen Zs are entering the workforce now. And when it gets to capturing the best talent out there, they're going to ask you, the founder, the manager of a company, what do you do? How do you care? How do you care about the environment, about social issues, so on and so on and so on? So obviously, you know, there's a discussion about that. I would say, yeah, I think we're all activists sometimes, right? So definitely, yeah.
I also think it's more about the meaning of work that we see, that we want to do something that is meaningful, and that's why we are seeking that in our like VC work. That's why we are looking for investments that can change something. So yeah, it's all about all the trend, the future of work, how we see the work that we are doing. That's why, for example, I myself came to Inventure because I see that I can invest in founders that can change something.
Maybe just very briefly, I think that outside of the Gen Z VC, the overall younger generations, we grew up as with this concept that someone else will have to do the policies, you know, like politicians will have to fix the environment and so on and so forth. Corporates will have to change. And then as you grow, you realize that like actually movement, you know, like this change comes from the bottom, comes from the consumer, comes from like, you know, what we want, what we post on social media, and this kind of like, you know, becomes a trend that influences corporate and government and so on. And I think Gen Z's really understood this concept and understood how powerful is the consumer in modern era with social media and so on. And that's why they are very active, and, you know, many Gen Z's identify more with their social persona, their online persona, than with their, like, you know, in real life persona, because online you do have an impact. You really change things, and that really...
I would actually add, I think Gen Zs don't distinct anymore between online and offline. I think it all becomes like a big blurb. I mean, working, you know, we're working remotely, in a hybrid model, etc. And I think if you look at Gen Z's Instagrams, for example, I'm thinking about the Finsta, the Americans will know that, right? I think Gen Zs are the Finstagram, which means...
Finsta stands for fake Instagrams.
Exactly, which are super real, right? There are ugly pictures, you know, in very weird poses, for example. But if you look at TikTok videos, it's about like being real, being like very genuine, I think. And so I think Gen Z's kind of translated to their online persona as well. There is not a big distinction anymore versus like, you know, millennials who use face apps like filters and so on. I think
I would argue this point because I think that we're used to wearing multiple hats, right? Because we've had to grow up with various different profiles, right? I mean, I've since deleted all the apps on my phone because I saw my screen time and I was like, this is a problem. But you know, you have Twitter, you have Instagram, you have multiple Instagrams, right? You've got your like public one, you've got your private ones just for your friends. Maybe you have another one for your project. You've got, did I already say Twitter? You've got TikTok, we've got LinkedIn still. What the fuck are we doing with LinkedIn? You've got Facebook, I guess, if that still exists, right? So we grew up with all these different profiles, and I do believe that we're actually used to code switching in between them, right? And kind of creating slightly different personalities. But I don't know if that's on topic, but I think maybe the takeaway that I sort of feel from what does it mean to be an activist, or what does it mean when you speak to Gen Z, I think most of the people here are either founders or will be hiring young people. And so if you are speaking to a younger investor or you want to hire younger people, I think it's really true. You need to be very authentic, because we've grown up being everything is organic these days, right? Everything has a green organic mark, and everything's very greenwashed, right? And I think that we're very sensitive, as you mentioned, we're very sensitive to like people are trying to sell us something. People, Dove all of a sudden is whatever. All these brands are trying to do something good. So when you are having the conversation with a prospective employee and they're asking what is your ESG policies, what is your diversity policies, it can't just be a clause. You have to really show what you're doing, because we've been fed everywhere, overwhelmed with all of this greenwashing, and all of us, we need to do something good, and all of these corporate companies that are like, oh, a D&I, but then never doing anything about it. And I think that attention and that importance, you have to be very authentic if you're selling to a young person, hiring them, or trying to get money from them.
Yeah, this is such a good point, because we're usually getting the DACH where you have metaverse, Web3, sustainability, something, and we as Gen Z, we really value authenticity, and we can really see when it's not authentic, and it's a very big red flag when you're trying to sell us the idea that we see that you're not doing, you're not actually doing. And actually, yesterday I read an article that Gen Z, young people, Gen Z, they're really into verifying information, finding references, understanding whether this is a legit piece of information. And that's what we are doing, and that's why for founders it's really important to actually verify the claims that they are doing. And for employers also to not to bullshit, how they say.
Yeah, I mean, we grew up in the era of fake news. Like, you're on Facebook and anything happens, basically. So you're used to, when somebody tells you something, you're like, okay, I'm going to memorize this information, but then I'm going to Google it, just to make sure.
I will check it many times.
But didn't your parents also tell you when you were growing up, never believe anything you read online?
For
and
sure.
now my dad's like, Joe Biden's going to war with Canada. I'm like, where are you reading this, And my father was like, never believe anything you read online. And my mom's like, yeah, I heard Hillary Clinton's a lizard. I'm like, what? I mean, my parents don't believe that.
And then I'm telling my mom, have you checked the reference? Where's it coming from? I don't really know.
I went on my father's phone. My father's from Tennessee, and his family's really into conspiracy theories. I went on his phone to see what his algorithm is, his Facebook algorithm, right? And you can go and you can see what's most shown in feed. And it was like the craziest pages. And I don't know if you've ever audited your own algorithm, and it's weird, right? That's a young person thing, to have this personal relationship with an algorithm, right? Like, oh, my algorithm knows that I'm looking at these shoes, and now it's showing me everywhere, right? I went and I looked at my own father's algorithm, and it was like weird, and I literally I had to retrain it to show him different things. That is something that is so strange. I don't think you've ever had to do that to your parents, right? And we grew up in the fake news era with people telling us to always be skeptical, and they are the ones that have created the fake news era.
Yeah, so the biggest takeaway, be authentic. That's the main keyword of our generation.
We'll figure it out otherwise.
I think that we also sketched in what's the future, more authentic, more impact, more diversity. Do you think there's anything else that would just sketch in the future of the investment scene as a whole?
Ooh. I mean, I hope we see alternatives to the venture capital model. Our managing partners recently found out that my Twitter bio is making rich men richer, which is sort of a satirical but kind of true, right?
You also
statement.
have the Eurovision thing on
yes,
LinkedIn, right?
That's a joke, kind of. But it's, I do love my job. But at the end of the day, the sad reality of the matter is, I mean, we only raise from founders, right? Most of our LPs are still men. Our portfolio diversity, most of the founders are still men, and we could go on about different aspects of diversity, but just to keep it at a high level, right? And venture capital is still taking money from rich people, giving it to maybe slightly less rich people, with the hope that they're going to make that money into bigger piles of money. And they can keep some of the money, maybe give it to the lesser rich people, but then mainly make the other rich people richer. And most of them are men, right? And as much as I do believe this model is interesting, and it does give money to companies and opportunities that banks or loans or traditional finance don't, I'm also really excited to see a new generation of founders and investors and other people creating sort of new capital flows and structures and incentives and compensation around that.
Yeah, actually, good point, because it's sometimes very disappointing to understand that in VC there is a certain profile of a founder that can easily raise a couple of millions with a DAC. All people understand that you're from Oxbridge or you have some cool background in a pipe drive or something. And that's why new types of financing, not financing, but VC models is something that we can expect. And the other thing is that we as younger people, we value more diversity, and that's why I believe that it can open up more opportunities for first-time founders with less famous backgrounds, female founders. That's something we are all promoting and that I see in my circles. So that I see that, yeah, first founders, more diverse backgrounds, I see the potential in there.
Yeah, very briefly, I think the startup ecosystem influences the venture capital world the same way the VC world influences the startup ecosystem. It's kind of like a self-reinforcing cycle here. There has been generational change. Startups have changed the way they're structured, the way they work, what they do. VCs will change as well. VC 20 years ago was very different from VC today, and in 20 years it's going to be a lot more different. So we have to be ready for that.
I mean, now you have Gen Z run single GP funds, right, that are raising huge amounts of money, and yeah, it's true.
But guys, Gen Z is like 25 years old. Like, there's new kids on the block now, you know? Like, we have one more year to talk about this stuff, and like, now there's someone else on stage, right? And that's exciting as well.
All right, the last question from my side. If there's anyone else, any Gen Zers, any young people, or any people actually, who would like to get into the VC world, become an investor or so on, what would be some tips to get into that? Because of course there's warm intros and connections and things like that, but you need some network of your own to do that, and there's fellowships and stuff like that, but what does actually work in your opinion?
I can take this one. So I guess the first thing is, as VCs becoming more diverse, I think there's not one right way into venture, right? So you can have any background, you can have studied anything, maybe not even studied at all, maybe you haven't even studied, right? So I think one advice I was given, it worked quite well for me, it's not that scalable, unfortunately, not repeatable, but try to build a brand early on, right? So like do something that sticks to you, something that is attributed to you. I don't know, host a podcast, build a community like I did, because through that community actually met many funds, founders, and started networking in the European ecosystem early on while still in uni. And so I guess, yeah, be authentic, helps also, but build a brand, build something that you're known for.
I would say also be skeptical, right? I hear it all the time, like, how do you break into VC? How do you break into VC? How do you break into VC? It's like, I think the preoccupation with young graduates, where it used to be in strategy consulting 10 years ago, it feels like now it's VC. I would really be why? One, it's a cool job, eh? I love my job. But our experiences are radically different, right? Like, I don't, what do you do?
B2B SaaS, deep tech.
Okay, no, it's not that different. But like, you speak to some funds, right? Like, you work for a large multi-stage French fund. I work for like a boutique, entrepreneurial funded Dutch fund, right? And your partners probably speak like this, and my partner has this Dutch, you know, it's like, it's very different, like the culture, what you look at, the ticket sizes, the LP structure. So it's not just like VC is VC, right? Like, maybe look at the companies that you think are cool, look at who invested in them, and maybe that's what gets you excited, right? Or maybe it's look at the backgrounds of the people on the team. But you don't just like be a VC, right? Like, I could speak to other investors, I'm like, I have no idea about deep tech, whatever, you know? And so I think be more skeptical about what motivates you and what the job actually is, and then be targeted in who you approach. And if I think you're genuine in that interest, you'll find someone that appreciates that and hopefully welcomes you on board.
Yeah, I guess having clear why you're doing that and why entrepreneurship is very, very important, because lots of people right now, like, I want to go into venture, I just want to go there. Like, why exactly you're going there? Second point is about brand. Building the brand is important, and that's how you can actually get in there. For example, I started off like building an accelerator, something that you did, you build a community, and that helps you to get the first introductions to show that you are into this area. I know some people who are writing Medium articles about like some kind of something related to startups, and it's also very helpful to show that you're active there. Some people are sending deals already to the target VCs that they are interested in. This is an amazing approach as well. So being active, understanding why exactly, and understanding that also VC funds, they are all very different. Ours is very entrepreneurial, you also mentioned that. There are bigger funds, there are different focuses, so yeah, you need to understand and research and have a clear why, because it's not for everybody, but many people want to get there.
Yeah. Maybe just to add on this, the VC industry is a relatively small world, especially like European VC industry. It's very relationship driven, so for sure, get involved with the community and all this discussion that we had. But it's not going to be super easy if you don't start with some connection. You have to build it up. It takes time. You can reach out to fellow Gen Z, for example, that they are going to lend you a ear and they're going to give some advice for sure. But most than anything, you get the why, you get your skills, you're ready, you want to get in, give yourself some time. It's going to, VCs don't hire in a specific period, they hire in a kind of like, rolling base. There's not that many job opportunities, so be on top. Keep on building, keep on showing that you can source successful startups and, yeah, get in.
I would say there's more job opportunities now than ever. I mean, everybody has a flipping VC fund these days. So guys, like if you want to work in venture, like knock on any door, like everybody's got a fund.
Awesome, thanks guys. So anyone who wants to get into venture, reach out to these people. You have them here in the background or hunt them down still today. And yeah, thanks so much guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.